Welcome to Cutting Edge Web Content Development, the podcast where we delve into the world of CMS systems and their crucial role in website and web content development. In each episode, we'll explore the reasons why founders, CEOs, CTOs, and CMOs of web content development companies need CMS systems to thrive in the digital landscape. Get ready to uncover the secrets behind successful website management, content creation, and seamless user experiences. Here's your host, Jonathan Ames.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Web Content Development, a podcast by ButterCMS. Here we share insights on the intersection of content and web development, and how you can align these two often competing forces to improve efficiency and business results. Joining us in this episode is John Hutson, Head of SEO at Inc. Digital. He's here to talk about maximizing SEO-based content. Welcome to the show, John.
Hi, Jonathan. Pleased to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background and your career, how you got into it, and maybe some of the clients and projects you've worked with.
Yeah, no problem. So probably like a lot of SEOs, find yourself falling into it. It's a bit of a funny industry in that respect. You kind of get into it in various different ways. But my background was quite a funny one in respect of the internet was just becoming a thing. So I've been in the digital space for sort of about 21 years now. Yeah, so the internet was just becoming a thing. I was fascinated about how to make money online. So I was just learning everything I could about that. So I was doing email marketing, I was doing PPC, affiliate stuff, then discovered SEO because I wanted to make my websites rank. To tell you the truth, I hated it at first. It really was not my cup of tea because you had to kind of work out all percentages of where keywords were and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually I thought, right, I've got to bite the bullet now. And the rest is history in terms of how long I've been doing SEO for now. I've been very blessed. I've worked across businesses of all shapes and sizes, across different regions as well. But yeah, certainly in terms of the big corporate brands, you're talking airlines such as Etihad, Aer Lingus. You've got insurance and health, which is Bupa, Marriott hotels, insurance companies, comparison sites, and all kinds of breadth and shapes and sizes of SEO campaigns.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you on here, someone with your deep experience. And, everyone does start differently with SEO. There were no SEO degrees 21 years ago. In fact, most people you asked about SEO, they're like, what's that? So yeah, it is something that people kind of move into organically. And I think there's a richness to that in the fact that you have a deeper, broader background. So you can understand how all these other aspects of marketing fit together with us. So, all right, the topic of today, creating an effective content strategy that aligns with performance marketing objectives. Speak to that. Why is this important and who should be thinking about this?
In short, everyone should be thinking about it. But of course, scale it based on your capabilities, both in terms of resource and budget. Because ultimately, I think over the last several years, the brands that behave like a media company online are the ones that are going to get the most efficient usage out of their content. The reason being is because it's got so competitive over the decades. If you are concentrating purely on performance marketing, it's a race to the bottom. The CPC is always going up. The CPM is always going up. New platform comes about. They're at rock bottom prices until 5 minutes later, everyone's on them. So it's just this vicious cycle of costs going up in terms of advertising. And of course, it's like a tap. As soon as you turn it off, it's an instantaneous end to that traffic source and an instantaneous end to that brand awareness. So combining that with the SEO-centric content or content marketing piece sort of really allows you to target anyone at every stage of the journey. Once you map all of that out, understand what questions there are around your service, your sector, your industry, and then how you can be, in effect, the brand voice that is seen every step of that journey. And by doing that research up front from an SEO point of view, you're going to get, of course, all the keywords that you can rank for, the optimization of the content in order to allow it to rank in the first place. And then you've got all of this great content that can then be distributed in different ways. So you can go about repurposing, say, a long form article into a video version, into a podcast version, into snippets of ad copy and ad creative. You can turn them into images and every asset like that in terms of different formats. And then you can utilize that to distribute out across the paid media channels. The other aspect is, of course, utilizing the traffic that you're receiving for that content to then put that into your retargeting mix. So again, if anyone has gone about visiting a blog post that is really upper funnel, what would be the next bit of content that they should see before taking an action? And can you help facilitate that journey in a paid media fashion by serving them the next logical piece of content via those paid channels, and then keep nurturing them further and further down that journey until you're ready to then actually advertise with a direct response messaging. So that's how I see things as an ecosystem. And I think if you start at the core by identifying all of that pillar content and opportunity, how can you repurpose that into different formats and then also redistribute that across paid media platforms?
Very good. So the strategy is to use your SEO content to determine what's best performing and then repurpose that into other channels like performance marketing to be able to get better conversion rates right up front and nurturing content.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So is the ultimate goal to lower the amount of paid ads you're doing, the lower the amount of performance marketing budget, or is it simply to just scale things?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, it depends on your appetite, really. If you'd rather not be on the hamster wheel of constantly paying for paid media, then of course, yes, it does open up the opportunity to reduce a reliance on that and therefore redistribute spend across more organic channels. Alternatively, rather than a pure reduction, it's a redistribution. So could that saving unlock an opportunity to advertise on a platform that you don't normally advertise on? Does that offer the opportunity to scale your brand awareness advertising versus your direct response or bottom of funnel advertising, where generally speaking, it's a lot cheaper? So it depends on your personal sort of goal as to whether or not you want to ultimately get more out of your smaller marketing budget or more from the same. And then you can look to scale and diversify from that stage onwards. Because a lot of brands, they struggle with the breadth of platforms that are available now. I've worked with many, many clients that wouldn't dream of advertising on places like Spotify, for instance, simply because that would be considered a luxury. Whereas in the future, should you go about reducing the reliance on paid media in terms of the volume that you can get from elsewhere, could you reapportion some of that budget that you saved into a platform such as that you wouldn't otherwise ever touch? And then you can explore those opportunities and then ultimately get as many touch points as humanly possible across the board.
Oh, great strategy. Do you think, John, that a strategy like this could ever help reduce the spend that's necessary on branded keywords through performance marketing and replace them with SEO content? I know, for unbranded, easy enough, but now there seems to be always an arms race among companies now that have to advertise on branded keywords, because if you don't, your competitors seem to do that for you and try to take up a portion of that. Is there a way to replace that with SEO?
Sort of, but I would say that's when you get to real critical mass. So you actually, rather than it's a case of people are still searching for you by a brand, and as you rightly said, there'll usually, certainly in the search space, always be competitors that are bidding on your brand term and variations of your brand term. And then also, of course, the tactics such as like that, but only better, for instance, or cheaper, whatever the ad copy is to try and entice you away from your original intent of a particular brand search. So the way you can somewhat improve that situation of whereby you can be less and less reliant on brand search terms or advertising for brand search would be to get to a stage of where you're big enough where people literally will just go website.com. So they just go straight to the website itself rather than search for you as a brand. So you should get to critical mass to just go straight to the website. I mean, for instance, we would just go straight to facebook.com. We'd go straight to airbnb.com, for instance, things like that. We wouldn't necessarily, in the grand scheme of things, search for them. Of course, search volume will always be there for big brands. People will always navigate like that, but that's one way of contributing to a reduction in that reliance.
Yeah, really good point. So if you're interested in this strategy, what are some key elements to create this high quality, engaging content while also maintaining brand consistency?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple of ways from an SEO point of view as to how you can get all of this information up front, ready for the research, ready for the content production, and then working with the brand team to kind of get everything on point in terms of your consistent messaging, your tone of voice, even your style guide in respect of like supporting custom-made graphics, for instance. But in short, there's a few tools. So the staples really in the SEO community would be SEMrush, Ahrefs, two primary third-party research tools where you can research in a myriad of ways in terms of literally going for the keywords directly, where you put in a few seed keywords and then of course it will spit out a lot of suggestions, and then you can filter based on, are they questions, what kind of intent do they have behind them, are they more commercially intent, are they more informationally intent, and then also you can dig deeper into specific competitors as well. So you can instead analyze on a domain level and understand how do they stack up in the organic space and what keywords do they rank for. some tools as well. So SEMrush, for instance, they kind of have an app marketplace. I guess you could say they bolt on to other tools. So you can do similar research for advertising, see what competitors are heavily advertising in the space, what kind of creative are they using, what kind of copy are they creating. And you've also got the respective ad libraries of the social platforms as well. So the Meta ad library, LinkedIn relatively recently got one. I think TikTok have an equivalent now, but certainly there are platforms that will show you what advertisers are doing on their platform, and then also give you an indication of the level of spend. So once you utilize all those tools, overlay that with your industry knowledge, either from your client or your in-house teams, ask the sales team, ask anyone that has touch points with clients and clients that are, what pain points do they have? What are we successful in solving for these people? What are our ideal customers? And then blending all of that together to put forward your research and then the content production. And as I say, from a content production standpoint, certainly where it's appropriate and where it's necessary, you'll have a brand team to make sure there's governance around tone of voice and style. And then, as I say, if there's any supporting graphics that can be created for that, not only for the on-page content itself, but then again, distribution across other mediums there as well.
Yeah, I find it interesting that there's always a large and well-defined budget for performance media, because they know that that translates directly across to leads or sales. But you won't have a corresponding well-defined or large budget for instance, research, to research your customers. How do we interview them? How do we know what the terminology is that they're using, and how they would say things, and what their priorities are as far as what aspects of this topic they're interested in. But when I see breakthrough work, it almost always seems to coincide with a really detailed and well-executed research campaign of some sort, where they're really getting in there and they're finding some customer insight. Sometimes it's like you said, it's connecting in through like your sales team or your customer support team and getting them to bring some of that back, kind of de-siloing those insights and bringing them into the marketing group. But often we expect to do all that from an aggregate level, and some of the best insights often come in one-to-one research.
Yeah, very much so. If there is a sort of budget constraint assigned directly to that, yes, okay, it takes time. But to your point of where you've got a potential source of information from a service support team, so of course the tickets will be available to analyze, and you can probably utilize AI as well, of course, to kind of get a general sense of what are the commonalities of them. Is it a situation that is a very frequent question that gets asked that everyone should actually know, but it's not clear on the website, for instance? Simple little things like that. So it's worth it in terms of you can then create an efficiency of you're then freeing up the service team from answering that question day in, day out, all the time, because it's not as clear as everyone once thought. And then likewise with the sales team, of course, you can go about recording the calls and then again utilizing AI to kind of pick out the commonalities of that information and then kind of formulate around there. So certainly nowadays there's a lot more efficient and cost-effective way to do it, but of course there is a little bit at the time. But generally speaking, that pays dividends once you actually put your nose to the grindstone and start working it.
Yeah. No, I love that you mentioned using AI to actually go through and try to find those trends within your customer support data, bring those to the surface so you can create content around those. Especially documentation and support web pages tend to get the least love from SEO. So because people don't think, well, we don't want to send them there, but why not? I mean, all searches are questions. And especially when people have support questions and you answer them right away, it just creates such a feeling of met expectations. And like, if they can answer this question, then I want to go back to these guys again because I was able to quickly get my question answered. Yeah. Love that. So say you've got this content, you're pumping it out, you feel like it's quality, it's helping you get rankings. How do you adapt that strategy to changes in the digital media landscape? So that could be trends, it could be behaviors that are going on out there, it could be things that your competitors are doing or things that are happening in the market at large.
I think that's just a case of keeping your finger on the pulse at all times, really. I mean, there will, of course, be industries that are quite slow and sluggish by their very nature. But at the same time, I think if you're an SEO, you need to get that intel from the people that are in the wider business in respect of, you'd like to think that the company you're either working for as an in-house person or, of course, as a third-party agency support, that the leaders will have a direction that they want to go. And they might also have very clear insights as to what direction the industry is going in, for instance. So could you leverage that information, even if it's a nice two-way dialogue every quarter, for instance? That can go a long way, where you can understand, right, okay, this is either the direction we're going to go in as a business for whatever reason. So we're going to pivot in this direction. We therefore need our ducks in a row to go about creating new landing pages for it, or updating existing landing pages for it. We need to retire these landing pages. What do we do from an SEO point of view? And then likewise, of course, understanding, is this something that isn't necessarily actually searched for at the moment because it's such a new thing for that industry? So therefore, don't get caught up in the fact that these keyword tools are going to return 0 searches, like the estimated search volume per month, because they're reporting on past information. So don't ever fall into the trap of saying, right, okay, well, no one's searching for it, we're therefore not going to bother. They will be searching for it based on the information that you've been fed from the leadership team and understanding the direction of an industry. So I think that's one way of leveraging, keeping on the pulse in terms of where industries could be going and how you can keep on top of that. And especially with, it's a very loose rule of thumb, but I think you can't go too far wrong if you always have in the back of your mind that SEO can take typically about 3 months or so to come into fruition, especially if it's new content and you've got no authority in that space either. So having that lead time as well and getting ahead of things. So as an example, as scary as it is, we're optimizing for a travel client on their winter holidays and their Father Christmas, the Lapland stuff, right? So we started that probably about 3 or so weeks ago, because we know when the search volume demand is going to start increasing. And subsequently, if we get ahead of our competitors in terms of doing it now, then this year we're going to be stronger. The following year, we're going to be stronger, and so on and so forth. So it is very much a case of, if you've got the historical information of where search trends do tend to change, and we've got very good visibility on that, on different keyword portfolios and individual keywords. Likewise, whether or not the trend is going up versus last year or down versus last year. So if the search demand has increased or decreased, of course, you prioritize or deprioritize based on that as well. So it's really sort of getting intimate with the data that's available to kind of lead that strategy moving forward.
Yeah, that's an important point. Is a lot of industries have seasonality built into them. And then building in those 3 months ahead of time, like you said, gives time for that to rank and to get ahead of those competitors during that seasonality. Even like we're in the software business, and you wouldn't think software would be very seasonal, but there are definite seasons. Times when budgets have to be used. There's times certainly when people have a mental idea that now we're starting on new projects. And there's times when people are kind of checked out, like the summertime. People are just not initiating a whole lot of new software purchases during the summer. So every industry, I think, pretty much has some seasonality.
Absolutely, yeah. And you're spot on there. Is like the amount of times a client would turn around and say, oh, there's not really any seasonality. But when you do the research, you do get a bit of a pattern. One additional thing to add to seasonality is, for what would be considered a higher ticket item to purchase or service to purchase, of course, you've got that lead time of someone actually then taking action. So what we have noticed in the past is we overlay the conversion seasonality, so to speak, from the client. So they give us all the history of every single month, how many conversions have we had. And then we overlay that with the search volume data as well. And what we have found in the past, especially with one particular travel client, is the search demand is really at the tail end of the year, but the conversions are at the beginning of the year. So it's the lead up. So everyone's doing their research at the tail end of the year, and then everyone's taking the action at the beginning of the year. So if you didn't utilize that information, you could either miss the boat or be far too early in terms of capturing those bookings. So as I say, it's kind of getting intimate with the data and kind of asking those questions, and not being afraid to either ask internal teams for information such as that, or of course your client, see what information they've got. Because as I say, because SEO is like steering an oil tanker, you can't just dip and dive in anywhere. You've got to focus on a particular area. Paid media is almost like a speedboat, really. So to be honest, in that respect, you can kind of change tack to almost on a dime. But with SEO, because there is always naturally that lead time, having that intel up front and working almost in sprints, really, to kind of deploy tactics and activities across each section of seasonality, really.
Yeah, no, I love that analogy of an oil tanker versus a speedboat, because that is very accurate. But also, the oil tanker has a lot of impact. As we saw with the bridge just a little while ago, that thing hits, man, you're going to feel it. So work on things ahead of time, understand your seasonality. Those are great strategic ideas. Make sure you're getting things done when they need to. Let's switch over to kind of tactical ideas now. What are some practical tips for improving organic search visibility and rankings?
Oh, There's loads. So I
There's
think,
loads.
I think a consistency for starters, I'd say, right, okay, from a tactical point of view, once you've established the fact of, right, okay, if we take the keyword research and the research has been done, let's now go on to the actual execution. I think if you always have in mind, you've got the basics, so that would be the title tags, the meta descriptions, the H tags on page, and the general structure of the content that you're going to be producing. Not only does that need to be consistently executed against, so you're always optimizing those elements, but then where else can you optimize from a more holistic point of view, such as internal linking? Is this part of a topic that is supported by other blog posts or other landing pages? Are you leveraging a blog post to link to a service page, for instance, and then getting links to that blog post to make that stronger, and then pass through a stronger equity internally via internal links, for instance? Technical as well. All of that great content that you're crafting, is it getting crawled frequently? Is it getting accessed? Is it even getting noticed in the first place by search engines to even give it a rank? So there can be situations where the crawl budget is such that the site is so big, it hardly touches the blog content. At best, it only touches this kind of the service landing pages or the core landing pages, and it doesn't have that appreciation of how much of an expert you are because you've got all of this information.
John, maybe explain for those who are not SEOs what crawl budget means, because that's an important one I think most people are totally unaware of.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So crawl budget really in short is when a search engine visits your website, they don't crawl the entirety of the website at any given time. So they will only crawl a portion. And one of the fundamental reasons for that is we'll use Google. I mean, other search engines exist, of course, but probably one of Google's biggest expenses is their electricity bill to keep all the servers up. So they don't want to completely hammer their servers with just one website, and then they degrade the ability to crawl the rest of the web ultimately. So they take little pieces at a time. And if you have only got certain avenues into your website, and they're the only avenues that they can visit or visit the site via, if they only crawl 10 pages at a time, for instance, they might only actually crawl those 10 pages every single time. They've not got those entry points. So that's why internal links are important, not even just from a pure SEO point of view of passing value, but just to get your content seen and then crawled. So that's what crawl budget is in a nutshell.
I've heard crawl budget usually used in context of large sites with a lot of content. Is that something that people with smaller sites of maybe 100 pages or less are going to have to worry about at all?
Probably not, to be fair. I think where you've got something for consideration is when you've got, say, a pagination on a site. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. is how is that being accessed? So it's not necessarily so much about the crawl budget itself, but it's the more technical aspect of, can the subsequent pages get accessed in the first place? So you haven't just got, say, as far as the search engines are concerned, only those 10 products. You've got 100 products over 10 pages. But also conversely, making sure from a technical standpoint, the search engine will not rank those internal pages necessarily for your main keywords, for instance, because they're kind of more navigational, if you see what I mean.
No, I see what you mean. Well, all right, let's talk about, so you're doing these things. What are some good tools and metrics that you would say are most important for measuring the impact of your SEO-based content?
So I think the obvious answer would be Google Analytics, although you can certainly argue as to how much Google Analytics has been butchered now that they've kind of released their Google Analytics 4. But I think if you do take the time on the configuration of that using Tag Manager and creating the events, etc., you do get very good information. Actually, it's just unfortunately the UX isn't as intuitive as UA. But Google Analytics is, of course, a core starting point, so you can get an appreciation for the engagement of each page as well, the general time that they're on each page, how many pages they tend to visit when they do arrive, how many people are returning. So, of course, the possibility there is you're being found multiple times, as well as, of course, people just visiting directly multiple times. So you're building up multiple touch points there. The other side would be Search Console as well, so a supporting thing. Now, the thing to mention, of course, on Search Console is it is only Google data, so other search engines won't be included in that. And it is somewhat aggregated as well. So it's not a case of utilizing hard numbers and taking them as gospel in terms of how you're performing. It's utilize them for trends and understanding kind of a deeper breadth of how visible you are in search. Third-party tools in respect of more specific, there's multiple ranking tools, keyword tracking tools. We use SEO Monitor. That's because it gives a real nice, robust bit of information as to not only where your keywords are positioned, but also all of that supporting data around it, such as your seasonality and also how the competitors are doing. And then you've got other tools, like I mentioned before, SEMrush, Ahrefs just to understand much more holistically, because generally speaking, it costs money to track keywords. So if you isolate what you do track on a regular basis to your primary areas, and then you can utilize Ahrefs or SEMrush to get a more holistic view of how many keywords are you ranking within the top 100 positions, is that going up over time? And then a bit of a underutilized tool, I would say. And this isn't really about performance in respect of conversions or search rankings or anything like that, but this is all about the usability of the site. So we've all probably heard of Hotjar and other equivalents, but Microsoft Clarity is actually a very underutilized equivalent. And believe it or not, it's completely free. So there's no limitation on visits and things like that. So I don't know whether that will change in the future, but we've been using Microsoft Clarity a lot now for really getting under the hood of certainly blog-centric landing page designs. And we've gone away and we've analyzed various blog page type designs. We've analyzed our own clients' performance utilizing that tool. And now we're going on a journey of optimizing them from a user journey point of view. So we've got good calls to action because we're already getting fantastic amounts of traffic to it. Are we maximizing that traffic by sending those visitors back through the site and putting them onto the key areas? So in terms of KPIs, really, I'd probably, of course, traffic to the pages, impressions, which would typically be seen via Search Console. So the more impressions you're getting, the more visible you're becoming. Keyword positions. Now, this is a funny one. So I wouldn't say exact position that you get on your tool, or if you search manually, is verbatim, simply because the personalization is too rife now. What you see versus what I see is going to be different. So again, use that as a guide. Is it generally a positive trajectory? Is it declining? Ultimately, then the lagging indicators would be the conversions off the back of that. Is that ultimately increasing over time? And if so, from what pages?
Yeah, that's something important to bring up to your executive suite too, because often you'll say that, we're ranking number 1 for something, and they'll go do a search on their own machine. They're like, hey, wait, I see it on mine as number 3. Why? What's kids? But yeah, going back to the very beginning of our discussion where you talked about repurposing this well-performing SEO content for other channels, what is the ultimate metric that you look at to say, this is a top performing piece of content that now I want to take to performance marketing? Is it conversions? Is it engagement? What would you say is the metric you use most?
I think if it's certainly what would be considered blog-centric content, I would go more for the general behavior on site. Is it popular, really? So not only is it getting traffic organically from, say, search, but is it performing well for internal traffic? So if you've got, over a long period of time, you've got a consistent performance of they're on the page for a reasonable length of time, they're scrolling through, and again, you can utilize Microsoft Clarity, Hotjar equivalents, whatever it may be, to understand, are they actually truly engaging with the content? Are they clicking through to other pages and whatnot? Is it in effect a gateway into the rest of the site as well? The conversion side of things you can utilize as a supporting metric, in my personal opinion, because again, if it's blog-centric content, it's not hitting people in the face with buy now, nor should it really, to tell you the truth. But certainly if you've got an appreciation for what content is engaged, and then subsequently are conversions either increasing or has it formed part of a journey? So another way of looking at it is in Google Analytics, you can kind of get a feel for the channel touch points. So whilst it's not as easy to dig into the reads of it was these pages that were formed part of that journey, you will, however, get an appreciation for start, middle, and end of journey. Where did organic search play a role? And what weighting did it have? So certainly if you've got a lot of weighting of beginning of journey and middle of journey, and then say paid media is the bulk of the end of the journey, you know that the contribution of organic has been from top of funnel, middle of funnel, and then of course, understandably so, paid media has then swept up that demand. So that's another way of getting an appreciation. But it would take a lot, unfortunately, of really exporting as much as humanly possible, playing around with it, even if it's in Excel, for instance, and then trying to understand that correlation. But certainly there'd be sort of the starter for 10 as to what I'd advise to look into.
Yeah, very good. Well, I asked this of all my guests because I think that you have enough experience in your career that you learned a few things. If you could go back in a time machine, talk to yourself at the very beginning of your career, John, what one piece of advice would you first give to yourself?
This would probably ring true, be it general career advice or SEO/digital centric advice. Stay humble, really. It's like never stop learning. If you stop learning, you become redundant very quickly. And I was very lucky in terms of timing, as in not only did I jump on the internet when it was very, very new, I was one of the first people in my school to have the internet, and I ran with it really. So take the timing aside of me being lucky in terms of that timing. Stay humble, always want to learn. I walk the dog and I'm listening to a podcast. I'm on the train into the office, I'm listening to a podcast. I'm watching YouTube on the TV when I get home. Now, I don't expect everyone to be a madman like me and consume content out of hours, but I think if you've got that passion and it is actually more of a hobby, you will go far. And just stay curious and utilize the people around you, especially how digital has evolved now. I mean, even SEO, you can get a technical SEO specialist. They might be terrible at link building and outreach because that's just not their jam. But what they don't know about technical SEO is not worth knowing. And utilize the person like that. And likewise for any other kind of discipline within SEO as well, or digital. So yeah, I would say in a nutshell, stay humble, stay curious.
Excellent advice. I think a lot of kids coming right out of college, they're like, man, I did my 4 years. I just want to work, not learn anymore. But that's the time you want to learn the most because there's way more out there, and there always will be, especially with digital.
Yeah.
So you mentioned podcasts there. What podcasts does John Hutson like to consume to kind of fill yourself up and learn what's new?
I think I've been a bit on a binge at the moment. I've got a lot in the playlist, but it's quite a mix, to be honest. I won't necessarily name drop as such, but I think in terms of topics, is a combination of agency-centric information, such as how to grow and scale agencies, so operations, that kind of stuff. Also, ones that are centered around interviews with people as well, because you get, again, usually a nice range of topics and different experiences. But yeah, it's all business and digital based rather than, say, crime thrillers or anything like that. I was always the same with books. I don't mind fiction, but I just don't read fiction. For me, it's interesting in terms of anything business, anything self-development, anything like that. And likewise with YouTube channels as well. It's either potentially the YouTube version of the podcast, but generally speaking, it's guides on how to do certain things and advice and stuff like that. So again, all in the marketing space.
I have kids, and my 12-year-old honestly sometimes learns more out of YouTube in a day than he does from his classes, because he'll come to me and say, hey, did you know this? And I'll be like, no, I had no idea. He's 12 years old. And he's talking to me about scientific theories, and the particular uses of various materials and engineering. I'm like, wow.
I'm really not surprised. Yeah. I think if I had to take a stab at a theory, depends what you want to do in life, of course. I think universities are in trouble. They've long touted these courses that are just useless, very expensive. And then to your point, sometimes you need a bit of guidance on what to learn, and then you need to kind of understand what is the wheat from the chaff. But that also kind of comes with experience. So just delving into a topic that interests you, you're going to want to actually consume it, and you're going to learn from people that have been there, done it, and taken the effort to share it as well with you. So it's a golden opportunity for those that don't need formal education to start their career. So I think YouTube, absolutely. I'm not surprised that your children are sort of learning a lot more from that.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, all right. Tell us a little bit about Inc. Digital. It's your place of employ. What are the best kind of fits as far as if somebody is coming to you and saying, hey, what can Inc. Digital do for me? How would you explain it to them?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of agencies will say this, but we are full service digital. So of course, SEO is our primary service that we were kind of born with, and the paid media to support that. And then also web development, CRO, and also CRMs as well. So we're working in those spaces. In terms of best type of client, so there's a generic answer to that in respect of those that actually want to grow. And I know that sounds like a silly requirement, but yeah, certainly ones that want to invest in them as a business and want to go on this journey of growth. So we want collaborative clients that we're in it together as a team. But in terms of sectors, generally speaking, we specialize in travel and fashion/e-commerce. They tend to be our primary type of customer, but we've worked with all kinds of customers, again, from what would be considered your small local businesses up to much larger brands that have coverage across Europe as well. So they're the types of customers that we tend to attract more than any. But yeah, we service in a multitude of ways.
Yeah. So how can people find you, John, and Inc. Digital online?
Yeah. So for me personally, LinkedIn absolutely would be my go-to. So I'm John Hutson on LinkedIn. And then in terms of Inc. Digital, it's inc-digital.co.uk.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate all your insights here. Fascinating, and has got me thinking in some new directions, and I really appreciate that.
No, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for having me.
Sure.
Cutting Edge Web Content Development is brought to you by ButterCMS. To find out how you can build better with Butter, stop wasting dev time, and free your marketers from your legacy CMS, visit buttercms.com. Also, make sure to search for cutting-edge web content development in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at ButterCMS, thank you for listening.